I woke up drenched in sweat, the remnants of a nightmare clinging to my consciousness like cobwebs. The room was dark, the early morning light barely piercing through the drawn curtains. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and a strange feeling of disorientation gnawed at me. I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand, but the words that escaped my lips were not my own. "Wire a nail?" I muttered, the sound alien and unfamiliar. Panic gripped me as I realized I couldn't remember the English words for what I wanted. I stumbled out of bed, my heart pounding. What was happening to me? I hurried to my desk, grabbing a pen and notepad, but as I tried to write, the letters came out in bizarre, twisted shapes I didn't recognize. Desperation set in. I dashed to my bookshelf, pulling out a dictionary, but the words swam before my eyes, indecipherable. The language was gone. My mother tongue, the language I had spoken all my life, had vanished from my mind. In its place was something else, a language I had never learned, yet it felt oddly familiar, as if it had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. As a linguist, the irony was not lost on me. I, who had dedicated my life to studying languages, had lost my own and gained another. I had to find out what this language was and why it had taken root in my mind. Days turned into weeks, and I immersed myself in the strange new language. I recorded myself speaking, hoping to analyze the sounds and structures. To my surprise, the language seemed ancient, with phonetic patterns reminiscent of long-dead tongues. It was complex, with a syntax that was both intricate and intuitive. I found myself drawn to old books and manuscripts, searching for any trace of this mysterious language. It was during one of these research sessions in a dimly lit library that I stumbled upon a tattered, leather-bound journal. The pages were brittle and yellowed with age, filled with symbols and notes that mirrored the language in my mind. The journal belonged to an obscure scholar from the 19th century named Elias Thorne. His notes spoke of a forgotten language called Ganesh, said to hold the key to unlocking ancient secrets and forbidden knowledge. The more I read, the more I felt a chilling connection to Thorne's words, as if he were speaking directly to me across the centuries. One passage stood out. To master Ganesh is to open a door to realms unseen by mortal eyes. But beware, for the language binds the soul as much as it frees the mind. The journal led me to a remote village where Thorne had spent his final days. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the mad scholar who had delved too deeply into things best left undisturbed. I rented a small cottage on the outskirts and continued my research, my mind consumed by the language of Ganesh. As the days passed, strange occurrences began to plague me. Shadows seemed to move on their own, whispers echoed in empty rooms, and I often woke up with cryptic symbols carved into the wooden floor beside my bed. Each symbol corresponded to a word in Ganesh, words I hadn't yet discovered on my own. I felt a malevolent presence watching me, an ancient force that seemed to grow stronger as my understanding of Ganesh deepened. Nightmares haunted my sleep, filled with visions of a dark, twisted landscape where monstrous figures spoke in the guttural tones of the forgotten language. Despite the terror that gripped me, I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth. What was Ganesh, and why had it chosen me? My obsession with Ganesh consumed me. I lost track of time, my days blending into nights as I delved deeper into the language. The cottage, once a refuge, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the shadows grew darker and more oppressive. One night, as I pored over the journal, I discovered a hidden compartment in the back cover. Inside was a small, intricately carved box. Trembling, I opened it to find a piece of parchment covered in Ganesh script. The words seemed to pulse with a dark energy, filling the room with an oppressive presence. The parchment contained a ritual, a way to fully unlock the power of Ganesh. I knew it was dangerous, but the need for answers overrode my fear. I gathered the required items and prepared to perform the ritual at midnight, the hour when the veil between worlds was thinnest. As I chanted the incantation, the air grew thick with a palpable energy. The room darkened, and a cold wind swept through, extinguishing the candles. The symbols on the floor glowed with an eerie light, and I felt myself being pulled into a vortex of darkness. I awoke in a vast, desolate landscape under a blood-red sky. The ground was cracked and barren, and twisted trees loomed like skeletal sentinels. In the distance, I saw a towering structure, a temple made of black stone. Drawn to it, I began to walk, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Inside the temple, I found an altar with a large, ancient tome resting upon it. The book was bound in what looked like human skin, and the pages were filled with the dark script of Ganesh. As I read, the truth was revealed to me. Ganesh was the language of an ancient, malevolent entity known as the Whispering One. Long ago, this entity had been banished to a realm beyond our own, its power sealed away by the very language it had created. The language acted as both a key and a prison, and those who mastered it could open the door to the Whispering One's realm. The final revelation struck me like a hammer blow. I was not the first to undergo this transformation. Elias Thorne had discovered Ganesh and had been driven mad by its power. Now, I was on the same path, my mind and soul bound to the Whispering One's dark will. I realized that the only way to free myself was to destroy the language, but doing so would also mean losing the last remnants of my identity. Torn between self-preservation and the need to stop the Whispering One, I hesitated. As I stood before the altar, the air grew cold, and a voice whispered in my mind, promising power and knowledge beyond imagination. The temptation was overwhelming, but I knew that succumbing would doom not only myself, but potentially the world. With a final, desperate act of will, I tore the ancient tome from the altar and threw it into the fire. The flames roared to life, consuming the book and the parchment I had found. The ground shook, and a deafening scream filled the air as the temple began to collapse. I woke up in my bed, the morning light streaming through the window. The cottage was quiet, and for a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, but the knowledge of Ganesh was still there, lurking in the corners of my mind. I had destroyed the tome, but the language remained. I knew I had only delayed the inevitable. The Whispering One's power was weakened, but it was not gone. It was only a matter of time before it found another vessel. As I sat up, I realized the true horror of my situation. I was no longer the person I once was. The language had changed me, and I could never go back to my old life. I was a guardian of a terrible secret, forever bound to a language that held the key to ancient, dark forces. And so, I live with the knowledge that one day, the Whispering One will rise again, and when it does, I will be the first to hear its call, speaking in the forgotten language of Ganesh. Let me know in comments if you like it, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.